Where are you at the minute? Are you Glasgow or London or?
I'm in Glasgow at the moment. Well, technically Paisley. I'm in Paisley, which is just outside of Glasgow. The rent is very, very cheap here, so it means I can kind of have a place to myself and have like a little studio room and stuff for mixing and things like that.
Have you got a home studio?
Got a little home set up in my flat at the moment. I've kind of always had a home studio when I lived back at my parents' house, and I've sort of taken that stuff with me, taken some of it with me. So I kind of I jump between studios, but I've always got this little setup in my flat for sort of mixing and overdubs, and obviously for myself, like, you know, I can kind of record everything here except from drums, basically, at the moment, which is pretty useful. So I've done quite a lot of the Catholic Action stuff here, or that Slow Weather thing. I've done a lot of that here, and obviously all my demos and stuff done here, and all my mixing and things like that.
And then you just take it into studio to lay down drums, and is that pretty much all that gets done there, or?
Pretty much, yeah. Catholic Action stuff, for example, we done sort of drums and bass and things like that in a different studio, and then finished the rest of it up here.
So do you produce other people's stuff in there as well? Do you kind of work on that there too?
Producing other people's stuff is basically, that's sort of my job. That's kind of my day job. That's really what pays the rent most of the time. That's kind of what I do basically, day in, day out. I'm kind of working with other people. Studios in Glasgow and London, and sometimes in Liverpool as well.
Are the pressures you face creatively when you're a producer different to that of a songwriter? Are there differences there?
Yeah, pretty different. Yeah, it's much easier to be more objective as a producer, because you, as a songwriter, obviously it's your song, or you and your co-writer's song or whatever. So you've got this. You see it from a totally different perspective as a producer, and I think actually sometimes it can be much easier to just be objective. Creatively, I find it easier creatively sometimes being a producer, in a sense, because you're going in and you're working on someone else's stuff, and it's not really as pressured. You kind of get on the same page as them, figure out what it is. I'm not really the type of producer that would like bulldoze your sound into what I think it should be. I just tend not to work on things that, do you know what I mean? If you're like diametrically opposed to where my tastes are at, chances are we probably just won't work together. So I'm not the type of producer that would just like bulldoze your sound and make you sound like what I think you should sound like. I like to kind of find bands that have their own like sort of strong identity, and kind of work with them on that, and kind of get them to where they want to be, kind of thing, or like help them realize what it is they want to be. That's why I kind of like working with the bands that I work with. They very much exist in their own world, you know, like Cheap Teeth or Quiche or Walt Disco or something like that. Do you know what I mean? They've all kind of, they've very much got their own identity. And that's what excites me about it. I like kind of putting my finger on what that is, and then just running with it with them. So it's really different from my own stuff.
They all have incredibly distinct personalities, those groups.
Yeah, whether you like them or not, it's like you can't really deny them of that. Well, that's kind of what's exciting, isn't it? I don't really want to listen to the same band over and over again.
How long does it take you to kind of get a sense of that personality? How long does it take you to understand it? Do you have to kind of figure out what works about it before you start going in and working on a track with a group?
Well, with Walt Disco, like the really early stuff that we done together, just out of sort of maybe naivety on my part, we just kind of went in and started, because we were just like the early, like that sort of, you know, all that like Drowning on My Velvet Bed and all the kind of earlier singles that they brought out. We were in my home studio at the time, at my parents' house that I still had at that time, and we were just kind of screwing about. You know, they're obviously really strong personalities and stuff, and they had an idea of where they wanted to go. But I mean, it wasn't really like a big conscious thing, like, oh, this is what we're going to do. We just had stuff, you know, we really like kind of all the cool Artie Bowie records and stuff like that, and some sort of 80s minimal kind of goth stuff, and just took that and sort of ran with it. Because we worked together for quite a while, so we kind of had, and it was like, because it was at the home studio, there was like no pressure. So we just worked on stuff for ages until we had tracks that we thought were cool. And then, whereas other bands, it's like, you know, I might be meeting them for the first time, or working with them for the first time in a sort of bigger studio, and it's more expensive and things like that. So if I'm doing that sort of thing, then of course, like, we'll kind of meet up and hang out, you know, a fair bit in advance, and kind of talk about records, and, you know, do some pre-production and all that kind of thing, and just kind of get, the thing for me is just, it's really important for me to get on the same page, because like as an artist, I kind of know what it's like. And as a total control freak artist, I know what it's like to kind of concede decision making, and you need to really trust a producer you're working with. Being on the same page is like vitally important for it to work, because otherwise you get into the studio and you're both pulling in different directions, and sometimes maybe that results in something totally unique and interesting and beautiful. But from my own experience, it just results in arguments. I always try and, when I'm working with people, figure out what it actually is they're trying to do, or what it is they'd maybe like to do, or where they'd like to go, and because that's exciting for me. I don't have a kind of clear-cut formula for whoever I'm working with.
In terms of where they want to go with that specific song, or in general, like where they want to take their band, like trajectory-wise, and where they want the sound to develop over the coming tracks?
Bit of everything, really, mostly sonically. My thing is, I really like, the older I get, or the more experience I have with things, I really have very little interest in the kind of industry side of things, or I'm sure we can get into social media in a fair bit, but you know what I mean, all that kind of shit. I'm interested in bands that want to make good records. Like, that's all I care about. I don't care about their public profile, their social media persona, or any of that bullshit. I care about making good records that people can listen to and enjoy. I
feel like that's something that comes across in Catholic Action's second record. That kind of dissatisfaction is, I guess, one of the main themes of it with the industry.
Yeah. It's a bit of a joke, isn't it? At the moment, very dissatisfied with. Well, that was sort of getting the dissatisfaction out of my system, and now I just don't care. Like, now it's just sort of I'm just sort of into what I'm into, and if other people like it, then good, fine. If they don't, then as long as I like it and as long as it's true to me, that's all that matters. I feel that certainly with social media and stuff. I mean, I really hate it. I really despise social media, and I feel that it makes. Well, I know for a fact that it makes me incredibly unhappy and incredibly anxious. I figure that basically the more I look at my phone, the more unhappy I am. That's just a fact. I can't really get around that. So, and that's just on a personal level. And in terms of music, it's making bands focus on everything but the music. Like, I think there's a lot of bands that are around right now, and you're kind of like, are you a band or are you a social media account? Like it just the emphasis is kind of shifted from, we've made this really cool record, listen to how amazing this sounds, this song is great, this song's going to make you, this song's going to make you go wild, or whatever you do when you hear a good song. It's kind of shifted to, look at our aesthetic, look at our aesthetic, look at our aesthetic, look at our aesthetic, and it's like, I don't really give a fuck. Do you know what I mean? If you don't have an interest in music, who gives a fuck? Like, I don't really care what you had for dinner. I don't really care about watching you practice. It's shifted the focus, and the industry totally encourages it. It's shifted the focus from, let's work really hard and write loads of good songs, because that's what matters. The focus is shifted from that to, let's spend all our time trying to come up with social media content.
I was going to say, it's almost like a misunderstanding of what made someone like Bowie work. The fact that it was so natural and so organic, and it came from his characters. They were so intrinsically tied to the music, and they came from that, and they were reciprocal, and they played off each other. Whereas when it comes to social media, it feels like a very separate entity. A lot of the time it isn't. It doesn't have a relation to the music.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. It's totally separate. Bowie, or in a more modern sense, someone like Aldous Hardin, to me, kind of embodies, they are their art. Do you know what I mean? So they don't have an, they use social media, but they don't have an emphasis on it. But they just kind of, like Bowie, they are their art. It's natural, and it's not disembodied. It's just them. But I just think bands are kind of missing the point a lot of the time, and I think obviously the whole nature of social media kind of encourages it. To just sort of obsess over your image and whatnot. And then also, obviously, the industry encourages it themselves. I mean, we've had that, like, much to the disdain of our label. I just basically turned around in the second album and said, I'm just not doing it. Like, I'm not interested in participating in all these stupid social media stunts to try and drum up interest for the band. You either like the record or you don't. Like me doing a stupid thing on social media, or a fucking live set that you can't hear properly. It's not going to make you, I don't know. I'm quite cynical with that sort of stuff, because I think social media in general is just kind of tearing at the fabric of society and just really fucking people up, like, in terms of their mental health. So I'm just quite against it. And yeah, again, it just, to me, it's sort of in a musical sense, I think it's sort of making everyone focus on everything but the music, which is just fucking boring as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I just wish people would just write, that way, and it's like everyone just drip feeds like one song a year. They build up all this hype around like one track, and it takes like 6 months. like as an art, like I don't know how you don't go mad. People don't go mad doing that. Like you need to, like, you get people that like obsess over like 3 songs for like 9 months and then just drip feed them, and it's like, if you want to get good at it, you need to just keep writing. You need to keep making stuff. That was like, if you look at someone again like David Bowie, like he put an album out pretty much every year, you know. And again, that stuff can go the other way. You can do the sort of King Gizzard thing and put out like 7 albums, but then it's sort of quantity over quality. It's like, you know, them and the OCs, it's like every album maybe has like 1 or 2 absolute bangers on it, and then there's just loads of sort of stoned jams.
I think it can be done though. I mean, if you look at someone like Brockhampton, put out three records in the 1 year, like a few years back.
Yeah.
And pretty much consistently still put out a record each year, and it's consistently good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, that's, you know, that's not really like, that's arguably the production on something like that is way more complicated than it would be for like an indie rock band.
Yeah, for sure.
Indie rock bands, in theory, could like fire stuff out because there's not really much going on. There's like drums, bass, guitars, keyboards, vocals. Whereas Brockhampton is probably, they're not someone that I'm entirely totally familiar with here, so I'm kind of taking a guess that the production is much more involved than that.
I mean, at some points it's very much minimalism, but it's minimalism that's very worked at, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, it's something you can tell there's been a lot of care and time put into to get the sound to sound exactly as it needs to and exactly as it should.
Yeah.
And it's a bit more off the wall, I guess, at some points as well, rather than, like you say, the kind of standard 4-instrument setup for a band.
Yeah, anyway, I'm being really cynical.
Why aren't
Sorry.
Why aren't bands putting out a record each year then, though?
Because they don't spend any time writing songs. They spend all their time fucking taking pictures for Instagram.
Yeah.
Maybe. No.
Is there a way back?
Yeah, just write more songs. Stop looking in the mirror and just fucking play music. Potentially that's how to do it. I don't know. That's kind of the thing when I work with bands, especially young bands. The thing I really would encourage them all to do is just write. Just keep writing songs. I mean, you're not gonna get any better if you just sit on the same 5 songs and never write anything new. And you know, do you know what I mean? Like endlessly tweaking recordings of 5 songs. Like just record them right and put them out and move on. That's how you get better. I think music listeners respect that as well, because it's more meaningful content from them. I'm sure if you were a fan of a band, you'd rather they put out some more records than posted pictures of themselves on Instagram, for example.
Yeah, we seem to have started doing this.
God, I'm so cynical today. I'm sorry.
I'm kind of in the same boat a wee bit. I mean, we seem to have started doing this thing as well, where a band will put out a single, and then they'll put out an acoustic version of it, and then they'll put out a remix of it, and then they'll like put out an alternate version. And I don't get it. It's like, it seems to be trying to put out as much music as possible, but also not really putting out anything new, just reworking the song endlessly for some. I think because of that thing like we're speaking about, they think they need content, but it's not actually interesting for people. It's just putting out stuff for the sake of it.
Yeah, no, totally. It's just kind of milking it, isn't it? And it's totally. I mean, again, it's not really just artists. It's totally encouraged by the industry, completely encouraged by the music industry to kind of. I mean, obviously for them, it's kind of, they want to sell records, don't they? But yeah, it just seems a bit sort of hyper-capitalist and a bit soulless really now. It just kind of, I just don't really know. Like, it just feels a bit, which is why, like, I feel like I've just kind of decoupled myself from it. Because whenever I interface with that kind of world, it just makes me really kind of miserable. I just want to focus on what I'm actually interested in. And I think that's what everyone should do. If everyone did that, then things would be better, instead of looking at each other and going, oh, that's what they're doing, or that's what I'm interested. Do you know what I mean? Like just trying to one up each other on social media or whatever.
I completely get what you're saying. I mean, it's the same. It's like running a music site. It's like you have to wade through so much fucking industry bullshit to actually get to the place where you can do the interview and, you know, speak about the music.
Yeah, totally. Like that's what just again, like my main thing with it is just, although I've been on a big cynical tirade, but my main thing with it is simply, I feel like the focus has shifted from the thing that actually matters, and that's, you know, good records and the music. Obviously the live performance side of things is gone, but also the other thing is I like mystery, because I'm kind of old enough to remember not having social media and being into music. No one really had smartphones when I was in high school. You had like MySpace. That was kind of the extent of it, but I know it's kind of the start of it. But one of the things that drew me to a band like, say, like My Bloody Valentine or something, here we go, is that there's such an air of mystery about them, or there certainly probably was back in the day as well. Like, you know, you'd have like the back of the record to look at, and then maybe an article in a magazine if you could find the magazine. Like, I really love mystery about artists. Like, I don't really want to know. I'm not really interested in what you had for breakfast or something. Like, imagine David Bowie had social media in the early 70s. Like, it would totally like shattered the illusion of like Ziggy Stardust or whatever. Like, you wouldn't want to know what motorway service station Ziggy Stardust was in at the moment.
Do you think it's possible to be a band without social media?
I'm gonna try and be in a band without social media. Whatever I do, anything I do from now on, I'm gonna, maybe I'll have to some extent, but you know, for this project that I'm working on just now, or the record that me and Annie Booth are about to put out, I'm really, really trying not to have social media at all. I know it's going to make things a bit more difficult, but again, it's just like, I've just got to this point where it's like, this actually just literally makes me really miserable and anxious. So for my own health, I'm just not doing it. And if that means less people know about the record, then fuck it, I don't care.
When did you notice things start to shift? Because I know you said that like you were in high school and it wasn't really kicking about. When did things start to move in a negative direction with it? And it moved from being like a tool to being something that seems to consume people's lives?
Well, it's just, I think it's the smartphone really. Once everyone got a smartphone, then you could kind of be on it all the time, and it's sort of never ending. And I guess it's just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse in the past sort of 5 to 10 years. But you look like there's actually really interesting studies done. There's a guy, Jonathan Haidt. He's like a uni lecturer. He's like, I think he's a psychologist or sociologist or something like that. But he's done a lot of research on it. He wrote this really interesting book called The Coddling of the American Mind. He talks about like, you look at these charts and it's like sort of teenage depression and like hospitalizations for self-harm and like teenage girls specifically, and like you look at this chart and it's fairly stable through the 90s and fairly stable through the early 90s, and then around like 2009 2010 when the smartphone comes out, it just fucking shoots up. Like, it totally like skyrockets, and it's not stopped since. And these are like, you know, from like little girls to like preteen girls, and then there's obviously teenage girls, and then grown women as well. And it's like, for men it does go up a bit, but not quite to the same extent. But it's totally wild, and it all like correlates with like when smartphones became really prevalent, when everyone kind of had one. You know, so it's just, I just think it's really bad. It's like, it's just really bad. I mean that this is nothing really to do with music anymore, but on that front, I think it's bad.
Like you say as well, it's scary how young it is. I remember when I was in school, like at the time it didn't feel young, but when you look back at it now, the age when everyone was kind of self-harming, or the peak of that was like when people were 12.
Yeah, that's
like, it wasn't like a teenage thing. It was like just before that kind of kicked off. It's weird looking back now how young people were.
That's wild, man. That's wild. I was quite innocent as a kid. I didn't really even know about I didn't really think about the concept of suicide or whatever until I was probably in my mid-teens, or self-harm and stuff. I didn't really know, like, I wasn't even aware that people really did that. You know, I was maybe quite sheltered in some way, but bizarre. Yeah, really, really bizarre. So I just feel that it's kind of really affecting people's mental health negatively. And again, it's just like, it's kind of, to an extent, it's sort of, for up and coming bands anyway, to me it's kind of diverting them from what matters. Very cynical today, I'm sorry. Very cynical.
When it comes to the music, though, what matters most to you, like, specifically about it? Like, I know we're speaking a lot about the music as a thing that we need to focus on, and it's something that's definitely getting lost, but what specifically about it is it that matters to you? I mean, what was it that drew you to music in the first place as a creator?
Well, you know, I just had this social media profile, and I thought having being in a band would get me more followers. No, what drew me to music? I grew up in quite a well, my parents never really played music, but they had really good record collections. And I remember from a very, very young age just kind of sitting in front of the stereo listening to records, and I used to just always ask what things meant. Like, I remember my dad was a huge fan of The Clash. I just quite enjoyed kind of asking him what the songs meant. He was also a huge fan of The Police, and I remember asking him what Roxanne was about, and he never told me until I was older, and then I figured that one out for myself. I was probably too young at 4 to 4 or 5 to learn about that one.
Were you quite curious as a kid then?
Guess so. Suppose so. Should have maybe just done science or something. I think I started playing guitar about like 11, and it took off from there. And then when I was maybe like 15, we used to kind of all hang out at the music rooms in school at lunchtime, and they had this old Tascam Porta-Studio thing that was like a blue cassette 4-track. That was it. I started using that, and that's how I kind of got into recording. It kind of blew my mind because no one used it. It just sat in this cupboard, so the teachers were perfectly happy for us to just kind of dick about on that. I ended up getting, like, I think a year or two later, my parents bought me a wee digital 8-track thing, and then that was it. I just started recording sort of everyone and anyone who would let me. Since sort of my late teenage years, I kind of got into recording more as a way to like record my own stuff, because I'd had experiences in studios and stuff, you know, with your like first bands or whatever when you're 16, 17, and I was always kind of like, I just always found the engineers to be really grumpy and kind of close-minded. Really grumpy. Listen to me for the last half hour. So I was just kind of like, nah, I'm gonna teach myself how to do this. I'm gonna like record all my own songs, and I'm gonna record other people and not be a grumpy dick and try and be positive. Because the thing is as well, like, I'm all the cynical shit I was going on about a minute ago. It's like, it's coming from a place of like, I'm trying to help people. You know, I'm trying to help people make better music and like get out of this like quagmire of like, all these external things that don't really matter. Like, if you make good music, perhaps this is naive of me, but I feel that if you make really good records, interesting records that people want to listen to, all the other stuff will just kind of follow.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you can get to that point where you stay pure to what your initial vision is, and you stay pure to yourself as you ascend.
Exactly. That's the thing, purity, loss of purity, loss of vision, because your brain is just so blasted with like overstimulation that you can't focus on anything.
I know you were speaking about your kind of early experiences with grumpy engineers. Do you remember the first time you went into an actual proper recording studio? Yeah,
the very first time I went was quite positive. It was with a guy, I think the place is a sort of a college now, called Riverside. I don't know if it was a college or not then, I can't remember, but I was playing drums in a kind of emo band at the time. I think I was probably 16 or 17. It was actually quite a good experience. That was the engineer there was actually really good. He was an older guy. Well, again, it kind of inspired me to go, right, okay, I'm gonna, because I sort of left school halfway through 6th year, just sort of wasn't really in a good place, and kind of thought, fuck it, I'm not doing anything here. So I left and joined that band, and then went to college and started doing sort of sound production because of that experience in the studio. Yeah, so the very first studio experience was a good one. There was a couple of other ones after that. I was just like, ugh, the engineer kind of made it about themselves.
What, in trying to impart themselves on the music?
Well, a bit too much. There's a fine line, I think, because obviously you do want to help bands, and obviously some of that does involve imparting yourself in a tune, and sometimes bands actively want you to impart your taste on them, but other times it's just kind of like, it's done not out of the desire to help or make something better. It's done out of the engineer's own ego kind of thing, and what they think is right or what they think you should do. You can't like impose rules on things too strictly in the studio. It's just gonna kill it.
Does it ever help to have limitations though?
Oh yeah, limitations are good. That's one of the good things about working off tape. For example, like you only have like 8 channels or 16 channels or 24 channels or whatever, and you have to make it work with that. Whereas obviously with things like Pro Tools, and as much channels as your computer can handle, so no one ever commits to any decisions. Whereas tape, you're like, you have to commit to decisions and you have to commit to sound. So those kind of limitations are great. But it's when you're some old engineer like scoffing at a teenage band and going, oh, you can't do that. Like, it's just horrible. Because quite often it's like, that's where all the cool ideas come from. People thinking outside the box or doing things a bit differently, and maybe it won't work, but maybe it will. But you'll never know unless you let some mad 16-year-old with an insane idea try it.
It's often, I think, as well, the things you find, or like creatively, the things you find on the way to your initial idea, like surprises pop up that you didn't even anticipate, that end up being the kind of interesting thing that you use. Exactly,
yeah. Yeah, quite often, like if I'm working on a demo or whatever, I'll be like building up an arrangement or whatever in Pro Tools or something, and you'll have an idea of what there'll be like a part of the song that's kind of boring, and then something will happen to it, and then that part of the song will become the main focus. Like that will become the chorus or something. Yeah. I think it's right. I don't think you should ever be closed off to things like that when you're creating stuff. Definitely.
Have you always, you were mentioning tape earlier, do you always record to tape, or do you kind of go between the two?
Go between the two, if possible. Because sometimes it's more of a hassle. Really, it really depends on how well the studio's set up and stuff. Because it's very sort of romantic using tape, isn't it? It's kind of nostalgic and stuff.
There's something about the imagery of it.
Yeah, well, it does. I mean, I think like a good tape machine, things recorded well to a good tape machine it does sound better. But it's like you can't really fuck with how useful things like Pro Tools and stuff are. So like I try and do like, you kind of try and have the best of both worlds, really, like, because you'd be insane to deny yourself the like functionality of something like Pro Tools. But if you have the ability to like say record, like your drums and your bass through the tape machine and then into Pro Tools, like this Savage Mansion album or whatever, I done that last year, and we recorded all the initial takes through tape, so it was like going through the tape machine and then into the computer, so you had like the sonic of the tape machine and the live band, and then we used Pro Tools for a couple of overdub. I mean, not really extensive at all. We could have easily done the whole thing on tape with a band like that, but just for the sort of functionality of it, after you'd hit the tape machine, going into Pro Tools was pretty useful. And then obviously to take it away and mix it elsewhere, you need to kind of digitize it anyway. But no, I mean, if in an ideal world, if I had all the money in the world, I'd love to have a big desk and a big 24-track tape machine and just kind of work almost exclusively off that. That would be amazing. But I don't know, if I can find like 25 grand somewhere, I could get like a really good 25, 30 grand, I could get a good desk and a big tape machine and then take it from there.
Does it sound different? Is there a different texture to it, the actual recording on the tape?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. It kind of compresses things slightly a little bit, and it sort of rounds off like the high end things a little bit, low end too. And people, the thing everyone goes on about with tape is that it sounds warmer. The way like a Mac DeMarco record sounds really warm, kind of vibey, intimate. Yeah, so that's tape, and then obviously you've just got the pure nostalgia factor of it. Like I do think it sounds better. Like a lot of it's to do with like the really nerdy stuff, is like even odd order harmonics, and tape and analog equipment in general tends to add even order harmonics, which are generally more pleasing to the ear or more musical, people would say, and things like that. So it's like it doesn't really matter that much. You're getting into kind of nerdy engineer territory, but I'd say like if you were like a good, the other thing about tape is that it's pretty honest. You have to be able to kind of play on tape. Like if you can't just loop it. Yeah, you can't loop it. You can't quantize things. You can record to a click, but you can't really edit it in the same way that you would if you recorded it on a computer. So it's going to be a lot raw, really. Which for some bands is great, and maybe other bands want a sort of more kind of modern sort of edited sound, and maybe it's not the best way to go.
Yeah, I guess it's about finding a balance sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. It's for the thing as well, I think with recording music production, context is everything. Like absolutely everything. Context is number one. So I think like that's why again, like I want to find out when I'm working with a band. I really want to find out what it is they want to do or where they want to go with it.
How do you feel like the context people listen to your music kind of affects the way they perceive it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I've obviously been the total cynical Luddite that I am. I mean, the second Catholic Action album was made with the purpose that you listen to all of it in one go, or as close to that as possible, but people don't really do that much anymore. But again, I'm just at the point where I'm like, this is how I've made it. If you want to listen to it like that, then you probably enjoy it more. But if you want to just cherry pick tracks, then fine. But yeah, obviously it changes. It really does change if you're listening to a record in McDonald's, or if you're sitting in front of your stereo just really actively. I find it quite a calming thing to do. Maybe it's just something I've always done. Just stick a record on and listen to it and don't do anything else. just take that 40 minutes or 50 minutes or however long the album is and just really listen to it, because you'll get so like if you're not someone that does that regularly, you'll be amazed. Like if you just give your brain the chance to fucking stop for like 5 minutes and just focus on one thing, you'll find it really calming, and also the music just opens up. There'll be so much more in there than you imagine there to be if you're just listening passively.
You notice all the little flourishes and all almost the motifs as well, the things that kind of link up. You notice all these things that like joining the dots almost when you're listening to it.
Exactly, yeah, it just opens up and become like it's almost like it just becomes a three-dimensional thing as opposed to background noise. And I think again, the sort of nature of, the internet and social media right now, there's so much information that a lot of it can't help but become background noise because we're so sort of oversaturated, like overstimulated constantly. Yeah, just things become background noise. So I mean, you'll be even more. It will be, the effect will be even more profound if you really actually take the time to sit and listen to something, because you don't really stop. It's like incessant. Sorry, I'm coming today. I'm coming from a total place of like, I'm in this weird place at the moment. I'm just trying to like get better and figure out how to exist sort of happily with things that are going on, because I've just found that things have got me to a place, and a lot of other people I know to a place where it's really quite anxiety inducing and sort of, yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out ways to sort of exist in a more sort of happy, healthy place, and a big part of that for me at the moment is really trying to disengage from the internet and social media in a big way. Like fucking it's just like a howling abyss, man. It's like, it's so horrible. You go on Facebook and it's just an absolute horror show of just, here's an endless list of things that are wrong with the world right now.
I've always found it weird how we do that, like the news. Like everyone comes in and sits and watches like a highlights reel of all the awful things that have happened in the world today. Like it's such a bizarre thing when you think about it like in an objective way.
It really is, and I think a big thing with the news is you have to remind yourself that it is still entertainment. Like the people that make the news want you to keep watching the news, so like of course it's in their interest to kind of. I'm not like one of these like pure nut job like anti-vaxxers that says don't watch the news. I'm just saying keep it in the back of your mind that it is a form of entertainment and they want you to keep watching. It's in their interest that you keep watching, so of course it's going to seem like an absolutely endless stream of catastrophes when it's not really. There's a really good book actually, I've just started reading it, called Factfulness, and it's just talking about, I mean it's a really positive book. Basically it's talking about how, actually in the modern world we're healthier, we live longer, there's a lot less, deaths from war or famine or things like that. The general trend is that people are, more and more people are being lifted out of poverty and all that. So there is a lot to be really positive about. It's kind of hard to read books like that. I feel it's hard to read books like that this year because obviously COVID, the Rona.
Everything's put in context, yeah, of this awful thing that's going on.
Yeah, it's important to kind of keep that in your mind, I think. Did you, I wanted to talk about this. Did you read that article, the guy from Fat White Family talking about idols?
What, where he was slagging them off?
Yeah.
No, but I did see this. But this was recently, wasn't it?
There was, well, I don't know. I think there was like an original thing like last year. I get the impression there was an original thing last year, and this one that he's just written is him trying to like contextualize it a bit. I just wanted to know if you'd read it.
Is this his blog thing that he does?
Yeah, I think.
Is this his blog? Yeah, I think I have
Wild.
read it. Yeah, I was reading that and there was something else. It was the guy from Sleaford Mods. I listened to him on a podcast as well, where he was basically, there seems to be a slight pushback against them, or people just kind of saying that it's bullshit, I guess.
Yeah, I read that article and I totally agreed with it. Basically, I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on it. I'm just kind of asking everyone who's sort of into music about it. It's quite interesting.
So this is the article that was speaking about the slight nature of them, where it feels a little bit forced in some ways, and it's trying to, I guess, capitalize upon people's morality in some way.
Yeah,
like appeal to people's better nature and kind of use that as a platform to excel.
Yeah, but I just think it's kind of dangerous territory, isn't it? This, really. Do you not find it? Did you listen to that new track that came out the other day, the one with the French title?
No, I've not listened to the record yet.
Oh, okay. It doesn't.
I don't know why I've not listened to it. It was on my radar, but I don't know. I feel like I don't want to say I'm over them, but
yeah, it's not very good anyway. You're not missing much.
Is it not?
No, it's just that
I kind of feel like it's done a little bit. But.
Yeah, it's cynical, man. It's really cynical. It's like it does sound like a Guardian generated algorithm lyric machine. Like it's almost like they've bypassed what it is they actually feel, and they've just sort of covered all the sort of hot button topics to try and
They become a hyperbolized version of themselves, almost.
yeah, they're almost like a sort of parody of themselves. It's kind of I feel like the article was really spot on as well. Just about the kind of way that kind of extreme left identity politics thing is totally forgotten about class, you know.
Yeah.
But dangerous territory here.
When I was speaking to someone the other day, when did politics become football? It feels like everyone's just got a side now that they kind of cheer on, and there's no real nuance about it anymore.
The internet, man.
Yeah.
The algorithm, man. It's so true. It's so true. It's like since again, it's a total symptom of social media. I think it's just that way because obviously you know that way. Like as soon as you start, you know, if you like the Guardian or whatever on Facebook or whatever, or the you know the other side, you know, like the Daily Mail or whatever, you're just gonna get, you know, your feed's just gonna become an echo chamber really quickly, and you're never actually gonna see what the other side are actually saying and vice versa. So everyone just gets totally polarized, like completely, because you know what I mean, you're only ever hearing what you think anyway. Generally,
it's so important to listen to people you disagree with.
Exactly, yeah.
Even if you disagree with it, just to give them the space, I guess. Even people that are, I don't know, quite abhorrent. Did you ever watch those Oxford Union addresses?
Which one? Who was on it?
So there was one with Tommy Robinson.
Oh, right, okay.
Who is someone that I was completely... So I watched that just out of interest. And it is important to listen to someone because you realise a few things that he's more a symptom, or I guess he has become the problem, but initially he's more a symptom of a problem than he is.
Yeah.
Like when you look at a lot of the experiences he's gone through, if you're poorly educated, you were kind of brought up in that area, it would be very easy to end up with those abhorrent views. Yeah. I'm not trying to sympathise with him in any way.
No, of course, no, absolutely.
It's interesting to see that side of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the more I think about it, the more I kind of it makes total sense that like people that would have traditionally voted to the left, certainly in England and stuff in the recent election, from sort of working class areas have kind of switched sides. It makes total sense to me now. I mean, I think like the left has kind of became really upset, like, well, A, really fragmented, and B, really, really obsessed with like really extreme sort of identity politics type thing. And if you're someone that works in a car manufacturing plant that's getting closed down, you're not really going to care about gender neutral toilets or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like that, I think that would actually be really quite off-putting. And again, that was the article about idols was saying that they tend to, instead of being, it's that kind of like tolerance, you know, like being like intolerant, like, I don't know, it's really confusing, but it's like,
I mean, they've always bordered on condescending as well.
That's exactly it. It's like if you're not hip to whatever like latest super woke identity politics thing is, you're an idiot basically, and you're like cast out. So of course, like people, you know, working class people that traditionally would go to the left are just going to be completely put off by this stuff, you know. And even though it comes from, obviously the whole identity politics thing, it comes from a really good place, and people should be free to do what they want to do, and you know, live without prejudice and things like that. Absolutely. At the same time, it's gotten to such an extreme that it's now alienating a large part of the left wing really needs to actually go anywhere.
It's bizarre when the people, you know, on the right who are like the millionaires have become the ones that have almost managed to convince the working class that they're their chums, purely by just going completely against what the left are trying to stand up for in a minute. I mean, it's difficult because, like we say, like the heart is in the right place when it comes to the left. It's just the kind of execution of it.
Yeah, it's just this kind of
isn't
done in such a way that it just it is like you said, it can be condescending to people that don't necessarily understand it, and it's so nuanced and it's such a minefield that I don't even, you know, I mean, I tried to understand a lot of it, but again, it's like you get to the point where you're kind of scared to say anything about it because you're like, I don't really want to put a foot wrong here and offend anyone or be, you know, so I'll just not say anything about it instead. And I think a lot of people are kind of getting like that, and that's really, really not a healthy place to be going, especially for art and creativity. And again, to talk about that article again, that's something that that guy from Fat White Family touches on. That's why I just found it quite an interesting article, because it's something that you could argue that, oh well, it's just the guy from Fat White Family just trying to be a shit stirrer. That's kind of his brand, isn't it? But I just think he made a lot of really good points in it, and I think it's quite interesting whether you care for their music or idols' music or not.
I mean, the they're a band who've always, or Fat White Family rather, are a band who have always been on the more provocative side anyway.
Yeah.
And they've kind of tried to push things in risque directions.
Yeah, you could just say, oh, they're just fucking edgelords. You know, I just think he really made a really valid point. People need to be able to express themselves, I think, and people need to be free to do that and free to kind of make mistakes and say things that are a bit off, because ultimately it has to come from, to link back to what I was saying about it being about the music and art in a kind of pure way. It has to be pure. It has to come from inside you and not what you think you should be doing because of things like social media and all this sort of social justice warrior thing in the case of idols.
Do you think it's going to burn out though? How long do you reckon it's got left? Because nothing lasts forever. But this whole cancel culture thing as well.
Yeah, it's too.
Feels like it's been going on for ages.
Again, it's difficult because I think originally it came from a really good place. Like, it came from people just wanting to make the world a better, more equal place. You know, like, again, it's kind of everyone, regardless of, gender identity or race or whatever, should be free to do what they want to do. Absolutely. I just think that the actual cancel culture itself has become really toxic and alienating, and I'm hoping the whole cancel culture itself is just a kind of reaction to how toxic things have been, and then once things kind of settle, there won't be a need for it anymore. Like right now, it's like super Puritan and really extreme because maybe those people feel like there's a need for it, and then once things kind of settle more in mainstream culture, then there just won't be a need for it. I mean, I hope it, because I mean, it's difficult. It's just like people are already just scared to say things about it, to put themselves, because obviously people don't want to offend anyone or put a foot in the wrong place, so they just don't say anything about it. And it's difficult. It's like, because it's difficult conversations to have with all these issues, because they are difficult issues, and you can't. I know. Here's another straight white male telling people how to think about things, and it's not the case at all. But I just think that it's definitely waded into really unhealthy territory now. But again, it's like it's on the right wing have gotten really extreme as well. There's all that QAnon fucking bullshit and all this, all the Trump stuff and the alt-right stuff for the last 5 years. So they just kind of balance each other out, don't they? Like when one pushes further one way, the other pushes further the other way, and it just, yeah, you just hope that it kind of, there's some kind of respite to it eventually. I'll give you there's a quick way to get respite from it, and that's to turn your phone off. I've been doing that quite a lot, or putting my phone in a drawer and just looking at it when I'm having a break.
I did it for a week back in lockdown.
Yeah?
Just turned it, everything, the computer as well.
Ah, nice. How did you find it?
Fucking great.
Yeah. More people should do it.
It's weird in the same way that, I don't know, drugs or alcohol seem like a quick respite for mental health that has long-term negative effects. It's an instant, turning your phone off for a week is an instant respite that has no long-term negative effects.
Yeah.
Like it's a completely healthy thing to do. But it's difficult as well. Like I don't know if you could do it now. Everything's back up and running again.
It's so hard, man.
Because of responsibilities to certain things.
That's the thing. I'm kind of at a point where I'm like, it's really, I'd love to not have a smartphone, but just for work, for like booking bands and finding bands and things like that. It'd be really, really, really hard not to have a phone. I'd kind of eventually like to kind of shift totally to doing just emails, but at the moment I'm kind of having to stick to the phone. It's just having it's like building up your own kind of like personal discipline to not just scroll Instagram for like half an hour and turn your brain off, because and it happens, and it's kind of scary. You've been like, you realize you're doing it, and what have I done for the last 20 minutes? My brain is just totally scattered. It's weird how often that happens.
I mean, social media runs on the same techniques that casinos do, doesn't it? Like they implement the same kind of the way you get an endorphin release, when you like something or you click on something. Yeah,
there's a really interesting guy called Jaron Lanier, and he used to work for one of these companies, and he speaks very eloquently about how fucked up it all is. I think there was also a Netflix thing that came out a couple of weeks ago. I've not seen it yet. The people are saying it's pretty good against the whole social media thing. But man, my main thing is just I just wish people would focus on music more. Like that's what really matters. That's like the actual records themselves are what matters. The rest is all just sort of promotional fluff. There's so much promotional fluff now that you have to wade through to listen to a good record that it's kind of off-putting.
Do you think a lot of the stuff that I guess the industry and PR companies rely upon or seem to place a lot of emphasis on, stuff like, you know, music reviews and all that, does it actually make much of a difference? Like, that's what I always feel like whenever I get stuff through from PR people. I'm like, if I spend 10 hours writing a review of this album, I don't actually know if I don't actually feel like it does anything.
It depends. I mean, I think it certainly did. You know, like in the days, well, I don't know, like in the 90s or whatever, when it was just music magazines, like people would, and I was kind of the same as a teenager, like would buy the NME pretty religiously every week and read all of it and find out about all these bands that I liked that way. I think reviews to an extent do matter. Like, again, like it really just depends on your platform again, and the more like clout your platform has, the more the reviews matter. I think, like, because obviously, like, I mean, sometimes I do go on to like Pitchfork and look at best new music and just stick one of them on.
I do that actually as well sometimes.
Often it's like best new music for a good reason kind of thing. Like quite often there will be some really fucking good stuff in there.
It's always interesting as well, like interesting to listen to.
Yeah, exactly. There's always going to be something.
Like it's not just the standard. Yeah,
there will be something cool in there probably. But it's tricky, man. It's like it's just everything. Like the internet's just kind of upended everything, really, hasn't it? Like, I mean, even obviously the music industry itself is like totally changed from the way it was. Well, all that Napster shit in the early noughties, and then
Metallica.
It's slowly. I remember I don't know why I did it, but I done a year's worth of a degree on music stuff, and I remember I had to write a fucking academic essay about that, like the case, you know, like Metallica versus Napster or whatever. That was quite.
Did they not like name their specific fans as well and stuff in the case? Like they had like specific names of people who had like downloaded their music. They were Metallica fans.
Probably, yeah. Probably. It's so weird. But I mean, again, like it's just totally changed. This like, so it's never a totally different landscape. There's so much less money and stuff in it, and I guess it's kind of clawing its way back in some ways. But then you've got like Spotify, who just don't really pay you. I think it's like roughly 0.1 of a penny per play you get on Spotify. There's exact figures out there. I'm not really sure, but it's something like that.
You wonder what it moves to next, though. Because I mean, nothing lasts forever. So there's going to be something after Spotify, but it's impossible. I guess you couldn't have predicted Spotify, so it's impossible to see what the next thing is going to be.
Yeah. Well, the amazing thing is, and considering lockdown and considering everything considering the state of the industry, right, in terms of streaming and labels not having as much money as they used to, and people not buying as much records, considering that. And then on top of that, you have all the COVID stuff. Considering both of those things, it's still amazing that people are fucking knocking down the door to try and record. Like, people are still churning out music, and people are desperate to make new music. So, like, I think that's something that really does give me a lot of hope that people are never ever going to stop making music. That, you know, and hope, like, you can just hope that the platforms are fairer and better and more focused on the artists and their music. You can hope that gets better over time. But it really kind of gives you hope that people are constantly trying to make music. Like, because I was really worried. Like 6 months ago, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to be able to record? Because I mean, like I said, like recording bands, that's kind of my day job. That's how I pay my rent and stuff. So that's what I do. So I was really kind of, am I going to be able to do this in 6 months' time? Is anyone going to want to record? Because they can't play live, but they do. Like, people, as soon as, like, you know, long before studios started, I think I went back to work in July, so I was kind of off from March till July, which was strange but good in some ways, and I was very, very lucky to be able to get that self-employed grant, because I know a lot of people get fucked over with that. But honestly, like, long before even July rolled around, people were messaging, trying to get in and record the music, which is really cool and really hopeful, because, like, again, me and some other engineers and producers that I know, we're really worried about how the hell things are gonna end up. But yeah, it has to give you hope, man, that people are, like, despite everything, people are still very, very keen to just keep making music, like, no matter what the world or the music industry or anything kind of throws at them. That's cool. That's really cool, and I think that's, yeah, that's pretty hopeful, I think.
What did you gain from those few months between, what was it, March and July, where it was kind of everything was, I guess not calm, but everything kind of stopped and was pressed on pause for a minute?
Just some drug problems, man. No, I'm only kidding on. I was quite oddly thankful for the lockdown. I'd just started writing loads, man. I'd finally sort of just got my head down and went, right, okay, just started writing that sort of solo type record that I've been wanting to do for a very, very long time, and I've never really sat down and done it properly. I've always written stuff that's obviously ended up being used for Catholic Action or just not used. So I done that. But no, I was in a kind of place where I was just sort of doing, from the start of the year till March, I was really just non-stop with recording and touring with the band. And it was that way where it was kind of like, it felt a bit unhealthy. I was just sort of doing just a total flurry of activity, most of which I wasn't really that interested in. So it was just kind of making me a bit sad. When lockdown happened, I was, worried, because I've got a good story about that. Like, we had to come back from America. The band, we were over there playing, and we had to like come back because there was a legitimate fear that we'd get stuck over there. But no, so I was glad that everything was put on pause in a way. Also, I was working with someone yesterday in the studio, and we were talking about it, and we were kind of like, it's quite funny that there's like, we were both kind of like, in a kind of morbid way, it was kind of exciting. There was a little bit of excitement about it. There was like, is this?
It definitely felt like we were part of a moment in history.
Yeah, that's weird. That's weird. The only other time I've had that was, I was old enough. I mean, I'm old enough to remember 9/11 when it happened, and I'm watching it on the television when I got back. Like, they took the whole school into the assembly hall, and I went to a Catholic school, and we said prayers and all that, and they told us that the Pentagon had been attacked, and then I went home, and I normally watched CITV when I got home, and it wasn't on, and it was the live news feed of like the two towers, and I seen one of the towers fall live. Like, that was a time I was like, okay, living through history now. And obviously, yeah, this year as well, it's really like, definitely we actually are living through history right now. But we were saying there was kind of a morbid, like, at the start of it. As scary as this is, there's like a tiny bit of excitement here. This is so mad. This has never happened before. What the hell's going on? Hopefully it's all right. Thankfully it was. I mean, I don't think it was as bad as people were. Obviously, yeah, it's been really, really awful, but I think
the death rate was nowhere near as high as they initially thought, which was a blessing.
Yeah, thankfully. What else can you do? You can only really take it as it comes. And I'm just trying to make it into the most positive thing it could be. I mean, our album probably came out at literally the worst time an album could come out.
No, I was gonna say, I remember the day the record came out. Like, I very vividly remember listening to it, just lying down, putting it on, and just listening to it from start to finish. And it kind of ties into what we were speaking about earlier, with the way you perceive it differently when you listen to it as like a full thing. Like, the emotional peaks of it really hit.
Yeah, amazing, man. Thank you for listening like that.
I remember Sign Here, when that just hits, the way that comes in like the trajectory of the album, and just the way it lands.
Yeah, thanks, man. That's really cool. Yeah, Sign Here is about a real person, and they know it's about them. and I've met them since. I've had a drink with them since.
What did they say?
Nothing. They didn't bring it up.
No.
Yeah. So I don't know if that means I've won or not, but wasn't as awkward as I thought it would be, which is good.
How do you determine like what the arrangement of a song's gonna be? Do you have the lyrics as the kind of the backbone and the structure? Because that's probably like one of the most, I don't know, the way the instrumentation kind of lifts that up. It's kind of one of like the grandest, biggest peaks on the record.
I'm trying to think. I think we wrote that one. Like, Andrew kind of came up with the chords for it, and then I think I was just kind of singing nonsense words over it, and then I wrote sort of middle sort of B section, and then it was a full thing, because for a while it was just the chords and we were just looping on them. It really depends, man. Sometimes like I'll leave lyrics till last. I'm actually quite bad for that. And then other times, I'll sit and it'll be immediate. It really depends. It just depends on on the weather that day or whatever. There's not really any thought to it. Just whatever sounds cool, to be honest. I'd quite happily make an instrumental album, because I don't really listen to music for the lyrics that often. The lyrics are quite often secondary to me when I listen to records. I don't know if that's just because I'm really into production or what, but yeah, quite often the arrangement, like a good arrangement, is like enough to sort of satisfy me, and then like on repeated listens I'll listen to the lyrics. Again, it really depends on who it is.
I guess it ties into that idea we were speaking about, discovering things that you wouldn't otherwise notice when you listen to an album. You sit and listen to it, because that's when a lot of the kind of lyrical themes and the motifs and stuff emerge, and they can get. I guess they just add another layer to a record, don't they?
Exactly, yeah. And there's always way more than you think. I think that's why it really pays to just sit and just listen to an album. It's just gonna be better for you overall. I mean, unless it's a really bad album, in which case it might just be
be
torturous. Yeah.
How did the person find out that Sign Here was written about them?
Because I didn't change his name. They are called Simon. Yeah, so I don't know why I didn't do that. I just figured that, I thought, this guy probably, he's like a big industry guy, and in a way he'll probably like this in some kind of egotistical way, or he'll probably find it funny. And the whole, like the Smiths wrote Frankly Mr. Shankly about Jeff Travis from Rough Trade. You know what, he'll probably like having a song written about him slagging him off, or not really slagging him off, but this big dramatic thing about the music industry or whatever.
It's got such a Beatlesy vibe to it as well, that track.
Yeah.
Which that was one of the things I noticed when listening to it the whole way through, is that then crops up again at the end when you kind of do like a slight wee riff, like on the end Sgt. Pepper, just that wee kind of looping instrumental. On the vinyl, it just it repeats, doesn't it? Like it doesn't actually end.
Yeah.
Like, it just kind of keeps going round and round. It's very My Bloody Valentine-esque as well. Like it's kind of the closest you've got to Loveless.
It's so nerdy, man. It was so nerdy, because I just wanted to do it, like, let's just do a lock groove. Because the first time I figured out what a lock groove was, I was listening to, there's a Brian Eno record, and I'd stuck it on, and it wasn't like one of his nice ambient ones, it was one of his like, like more like weird sort of art pop things, like Taking Tiger Mountain or something like that, I think. And I'd put it on, and I was like, I'm just going to lie down and just listen to it, and at the end of the first side there's a lock groove, but it's on a fucking alarm sound, and I was, where you're like just about to get to sleep, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to fucking get up, because I thought, the record will just end and I can fall asleep and turn it off later, but no, there was an alarm, so I thought, fuck this, but also I want to do that.
It's just a cruel joke.
Yeah, well, I mean, ours was just it was just a wee nerdy touch, because we're all a bit nerdy, really. We like things like that. But no, that's cool. Yeah, I like the little lock groove at the end. Yeah, it's a total Beatlesy, just nerdy record thing, I suppose.
When did you kind of get into the kind of technical side of things? Like, you sound like you're a bit of an audiophile.
Yeah.
The technical, the way that things operate, and the kind of science behind music and how it functions.
When did I get into, like, just when I was a teenager, man? Like, when I just got really into recording bands. Well, just through, I wanted to record my own stuff, so it was just like figuring out how to do that kind of properly, and then I got really, really into it and done it at like college, and worked as like an assistant engineer for someone at the Green Door studio in Glasgow for a while, and just kind of so I mean, the thing is, I'm at a point where I'm just as happy making other people's records as I am my own. I definitely know I need to do this solo thing. Like I need to just do that for my soul I need to do that to be happy, I think. Something about songwriting that just is kind of good for me when you do it. It's just like when you write a new song, I just almost exclusively feel a lot better, even if it's the saddest song I've ever written. You just feel like you've exercised something, and it's quite healthy. But recording wise, man, I'm just as much into producing someone else or mixing someone else's record as I am doing my own stuff. So the technical stuff came early on. I've always been kind of into that.
With the solo record as well, and that like desire and that need to make it. Is it tapping into something that you haven't before? Is that what's fueling that desire?
It's really hard to explain it. I feel like with Catholic Action, I've never done something that's like really super cohesive and is totally me. It's kind of hard. It's hard to explain. I just want to do something really quite simple and true to myself, out with the like confines of a band or the confines of industry or any kind of expectations. I've always just written songs that have been like, well, this maybe wouldn't really go with Catholic Action, or there's been times where like people that know me quite well have like, seen Catholic Action or listened to them and said, well, on some of the songs it maybe doesn't sound like you as a person, Some of them obviously do, but some of them don't. As time goes on, you kind of change, and things that you're into change. And yeah, I just feel like I've just always wanted to do it. I've always wanted to just make a solo record and just without any kind of external influence, because I can be quite awkward and stuff to work with. I think I'm not. It depends. Like, I mean, I think I'm probably quite awkward to be in a band with, because I've got the kind of producer hat on, but I've also got the sort of songwriter hat on and band member hat on. So I think that can, I don't know, make things awkward and things get kind of tense. And I just want to make something that's just doesn't have any of those kind of pressures. I just want to follow completely what's sort of meaningful for me at that moment, without any external influence. And again, it's just something that's been really bugging me, because I've always wanted to do it and I've never seen it through, kind of thing, because I've never really had time, like, fully. I've always been kind of doing the band stuff or recording other people, whereas lockdown's kind of given me loads of time to be like, to just kind of get back to where I came from, man. I feel like I really regressed in a good way to like my 17-year-old self. I was kind of just basically writing songs and playing Halo a lot of the time. It was pretty good.
It's the perfect life.
It was good. So I've been taking it easy, man, like getting back into things and just being a lot more selective with what I'm doing, kind of, as opposed to just filling up my calendar to pay the rent. It's kind of, I'm trying to make sure that shit's sorted and then try and spend a bit more time each month kind of working on my own stuff. Like, so that this month I've been lucky enough to just take it off completely, and I've just focused on my own stuff all this month, building up a little mixing room kind of thing. Like, I've built it up in my old room at my parents' house just now, which is where I've recorded so much stuff in that room, man. Like, Doing Well track was recorded in there, and all of that track, One of Us, because the One of Us that on the album is actually the demo version that we recorded.
I remember hearing this.
Yeah, it was just better. It just had good vibes. It just had the right feel to it, even though it was recorded in a bedroom. You know, and by bedroom, I mean literally a bedroom. Like, we were on top of each other pretty much.
Did you redo it in the studio? Did you like go in and re-record it and see how it sounded?
Yeah, we did, but we just didn't like it as much. There was just something really vibey about the demo version of it that we didn't beat. And sometimes that's the case, man. I think that's the one thing about technical stuff is it's good to know the technical stuff, but you don't want to let it overtake the creative side of things, because at the end of the day, like, it doesn't really matter what microphone you use. If the song's good, then that's all that matters. You know, if even if it sounds really ratty or whatever. There's a really great interview with it went up the other day. There's a really cool, if anyone's into recording, that KEXP thing brought out, there's like a new series called Isolated Tracks, and they done one with the guy from King Gizzard, and it's amazing. And he just like, you should steal this idea, it'd be really cool. They like just go through they go through all the isolated stems of a song. So it's like, he talks about how he recorded the drums and then the bass and then the guitar, and like it shows you, like, because they're doing like the screen mirroring thing, and you can like see his Pro Tools session or whatever, like building up with all this stuff that he does. And again, like, one of his big things is like he's recording on really cheap, weird equipment. And it was the same with us when we were doing stuff at that home studio. It's all just like cheap mics and stuff, but it doesn't matter. It's like, it's about the actual take. It's about the actual vibe. Doesn't matter what microphone you capture that on, if the vibe is there and the playing and the songwriting, then it's sorted. Yeah,
the emotion of it is more key to the success of the song.
Yeah.
I mean, with that song, One of Us, being recorded just in the bedroom studio, is part of that because of the environment? Is that part of what's contributing to that vibe?
Probably. It's definitely more relaxed. It's why, this is what I was talking about. I'm building up a little mixing space, and I'm building it in that room just now, like treating all the room properly, redoing all the patch bay with like my mixing desk and all that stuff, and because I've got analog outboard gear and like tape machines and shit. Once that's set up there, I want to move it. I want to find somewhere in Glasgow that I can move it into and just have a really nice, relaxed recording and mixing space that maybe me and a few other bands could share. Because environment's everything, man. Like, if you bring like a really young band, I forget, but recording studios really can be intimidating and kind of weird places. And if you took like a band that weren't used to it, like, into a really big studio, you can really freak them out. There's always an aspect of like, when you take a band into a room for the first time, set all the mics up and stuff, you can kind of hear it. You can kind of hear them getting more comfortable in the space. Yeah, like I try and kind of factor that in when I'm recording. So like the Cheap Teeth EP, the one that's out, we factored that in. We kind of really wanted to capture the energy that they have when they play live. We didn't want it to be too much of a like studio construction, so it was fairly live. But to kind of get them in the zone, we didn't really start until like late at night, because we had this conversation when I was hanging out with them that, like, you know what I mean, it feels kind of weird playing rock and roll music at 10 in the morning. Some people like that, and I think that's kind of fine when you're doing overdubs or mixing and stuff. But sometimes for the initial takes, you kind of want to get into the spirit or the vibe that you're in, like that kind of late night gig vibe. So we really didn't, like, I mean, it meant that I think I got home from the studio at like 6 in the morning or something mental like that. But because the band had gotten comfortable in the space and the vibe was right, it just happened, and we must have got like a good 95% of the whole EP done in that one stretch.
Man, I mean, there's a real kind of like late night haunted house vibe about that EP as well.
Exactly,
like,
yeah.
But it's got like a horror film kind of vibe.
Exactly. Some of the Walt Disco stuff was like that as well. Like, we ended up, it was obviously the initial tracks that we done in the same bedroom that I'd done like One of Us and stuff in, but we done some stuff down in London as well, and that ended up being super duper late night vibes.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of something like the start, like Past Tense, it's almost got like a slightly, you know, kind of ghoulish quality at the beginning of that song.
Yeah, that one was fairly late at night as well. I think we done that one at Chem 19 in Glasgow, which is the same place that we done the Cheap Teeth record. But yeah, the environment's a big deal, and again, it's one of the reasons why I kind of hop between studios. I'd kind of, like I said, I'd like to have my own little base in Glasgow somewhere, which is kind of what I'm putting together. I'm like building it up in that room to kind of, as like proof of concept, to make sure it all works. Then I'm just going to kind of move it all wholesale into somewhere in Glasgow. But yeah, I'd like to have my own base, but at the same time, I like hopping between studios because I think you can't really do one size fits all with recording or producing in that sense.
Yeah, different studios work better for different bands.
Yeah, you wouldn't really want to take like a band that had never recorded before into like Studio 1 at Chem 19, because it's fucking massive, and like there's loads of like big racks of equipment and a huge mixing desk, and it's like quite intimidating. Like you feel it. Like I remember when we done stuff in there like last year actually, and I like felt myself not being comfortable until like the third song, until we'd like played through a song like 2 or 3 times. I could like feel the nerves in my body like, you know, ironing themselves out as I got comfortable in the space. And we've had lots of studio experience, so, you know, to take like a brand new band in there would be a bit silly.
Where is the ideal space for like a brand new band? Where would you?
I usually do stuff for bands like that in Chem Studio 2 at the moment. It's where I done the first Cheap Teeth thing, and it's where I done those Walt Disco things, or some of them. Yes, yeah, it's like a little smaller. It's a smaller space. It's still a studio. It's not a bedroom. It's still a decent sized place. It's just not massive. It's like, but you've got everything you need, and then once you're like comfortable there, then I mean, again, it also depends on what sound you're going for. Like if they were a new band and they wanted to have fucking massive drums, like a big natural drum sound, then yeah, you'd probably want to have them in a bigger space, and that's fine. But for most bands, you'd kind of, I don't know, environment's better, man. If you can get them into a space where they're comfortable, then they're gonna sound better. They're just gonna play better than themselves. They're gonna feel free to say insane things and try insane things. Like again, like that was the thing from my own experiences really early on when I was younger. I was like, I just felt that I was in an environment where I couldn't be properly creative, which is fucking mental. You know, you want to be able to create an environment where you can be free to make spectacular mistakes. I like trying to sort of conjure that environment for bands.
I guess you gain a better understanding as well of where you work best creatively. Like what you were saying about how you felt like you couldn't be creative in that environment. As with time and as you kind of develop, you get a sense of what you can do to engineer a space that can occur.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just it's kind of nice, you know, being a songwriter and an artist, and myself as well as being a producer, because you kind of learn a lot about the other.
Well, so what have you learned most from being a producer that has affected your songwriting, and what have you learned most from being a songwriter that has affected your production? I'm
not really sure. I think with songwriting, I try and keep that fairly sort of sacred and separate. I've always been someone that's like trimmed the fat. Whenever I get bored during a song that I've written, I usually just cut the section or change it. Like, even if that means the song is going to be 2.5 minutes long, that's fine with me.
It can be really liberating to take something out.
Exactly. The production side of it's definitely had much more of an influence on like arrangement and like instrumentation and things like, so this chorus, for example, maybe feels like it's lacking on the low end. So, you know, I'd maybe play an instrument with lots of low end in it. as opposed to like stick another high part. You start thinking about arrangement in terms of like frequencies and shit like that. Not, oh my god, it needs loads of 200 hertz. It's more like there's like this, it just needs that body to it, or it needs that kind of high shimmer, or you can kind of feel what works and what doesn't more. And I've also just always been kind of a firm believer in the sort of studio as an instrument kind of approach, and I think that's really evident on the second Catholic Action album. A lot of the tracks are total studio tracks that were just written and sort of recorded mostly in this very room. Actually, I'm in my little home studio in my flat. Having the production side of things means that I'm not really closed off to this kind of thing. I can use production tricks and stuff like that to kind of make the arrangement a bit more interesting, or just come up with really strange sounds kind of thing. Some tracks are more like bandy tracks. Grange Hill, or what do you call it, One of Us. They're more like written in the room kind of thing with the band.
I mean, Grange Hill, like the start of that, the way the introduction to that, just absolute blast of sound. At what point did that come in? Did that change a lot? That opening kind of just, it's like a punch in the face. It just smacks you straight in. Yeah,
no, we just always did that. That's just how we started it. I think with the Catholic Action stuff, there's always like always a bit cheeky, isn't it? There's always like a wee bit. It's like a sort of knowing wink, isn't it?
Start a Witness as well. With its
that's really funny actually. That's Jamie. Me and Andrew were working on that track, and Jamie was at work at the time, and we thought, oh, this will be really funny. We'll get him to do backing vocals over the phone because it will sound weird. Because obviously, so we were recording the phone call, and we ended up not using the backing vocals that he did over the phone, but we did keep that bit because he was like in the toilet at work. We convinced him to go to the toilet at work and just record these vocals for us.
The thing is, you have to really go for it as well. You can't like half-arse that.
Yeah,
that's proper singing in the toilet.
Yeah, and we were just I was trying to get him to say different things, and obviously he wasn't having that. So that's what made the thing. Whereas the other track that was quite funny was the very last track on the record came about. It was just me and Andrew again, kind of. I don't know where the other two were. I don't know. We were in the studio anyway, and down in London, and there was this like journalist who had done this interview and stuff, and it was great. But then they were just hanging around, and they were just kind of filming everything we were doing. And I thought it'd be funny to just write the lyrics about that. The go away, or whatever I'm saying, I can't remember. Came from that. We kind of just layered all the track up that night and done that, which is quite funny. I think I added the little omnichord section later on when it goes really quiet, but that was really funny that night. It was just that's the total kind of sense of humour that makes a Catholic Action track a Catholic Action track, I think.
Yeah, like you say, that knowing wink.
Yeah. So the solo stuff is different in that it's just a bit more honest and open, and this time I'm trying to like finish the writing process first before I do any recording. So I've been demoing them, yeah. Some of them are fairly fleshed out demos, but I'm trying not to mix the two processes up because I've always done that in the past. I've always started recording things properly before I've finished writing them, and it means that the process gets really like convoluted and confused.
It can be difficult because did you not basically engineer most of the last record as well as producing and writing it?
Yeah, so that's quite hard work. I don't know, and I may well do that again with this solo thing. It really depends on how I'm going to record it and if there's like a budget for it or not. I'd like to maybe record it with someone else. It just depends. If I can get the money to do that, then I probably will. But if not, then I'll just do it myself. But it'll be easier because it's just me. There's not going to be any like distractions.
Do you think you're more creative around more or less people when you're in a room and working in that environment?
Overall, probably with less people if it's my own stuff. But in the right circumstances, I think I can be pretty creative with a group of people. In a production sense, absolutely, obviously, like when you're with more people and it's kind of a healthy environment and everyone's kicking ideas about, then that's great. You know, that obviously is. So in the production sense, yeah. Obviously when I'm with other people, it's more creative. For my own music, I probably come up with my best stuff when I'm on my own, unless it's like a band thing. Like, unless it's the four of us kind of jamming and kicking out ideas in a room, then that can be pretty creative too.
I guess it depends on the song as well. And kind of certain songs are better suited to that personal, very kind of soul, refined view of one individual, and some kind of benefit a wee bit more from having different things kind of thrown in.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
How do you know which is which? When you're writing songs, do you know this is a Catholic Action song or this is maybe something that'd be better left for the solo record? How do you kind of define what should go where and what project it should be.
Historically pretty bad at that. Yeah, historically I'm quite bad at knowing that sort of thing. I think I'm getting much better at it now. I kind of know what it is. Like, I've written to this solo thing I'm doing. I think I've got like 20 odd songs done. I'm not sure if I'm going to write more or not for it. Maybe I will. I need to sit back and listen to all of them and kind of figure out. I know for a fact that maybe 3 or 4 of them are definitely Catholic Action songs. Like, I can't really sit down and go, okay, I'm going to write this type of song today. I kind of just let myself go, and then at the end of the day I'm like, all right, that's that, and then I can sort it later. So I think the thing that works best for me is just write loads and then sort it into what goes with what.
Why historically do you feel that you've not been good at that?
I feel like I'd like to do something just a bit more consistent over the course of a record. There's something to be said about a record that is one vibe. Again, to talk about someone like Mac DeMarco, right? You kind of... What's the record of his with like This Old Dog on it? It's like second last album or something. I can't remember what it's called.
It's called... Is it not called This Old Dog?
Maybe it's got those ones on it anyway, but it's that album, and I really love that. Like, I kind of know what I'm getting for that whole album. Do you know what I mean? So it makes it quite a nice album to put on in a moment. Like, I'm going for a drive, or I've got friends over or something, and I want the mood to be one specific thing. I'd quite like to make an album that's sort of like that. Catholic Action albums, certainly the second one, they're more like the later Beatles albums, in that they kind of jump between styles. Not styles, but like, so like One of Us could almost be on a different album from People Don't Protest Enough. Like, I think that's pretty wild that they're on the same album, and I think that's cool. Like, that's just kind of who we are, or who we were at that moment.
There's a very cohesive personality about them, though. Even if the style of the song is different, they still kind of occupy the same soundscape and the same... You could tell it was from the same band, I think.
Cool.
Just
Well,
from the
see,
song
that's the difficult thing about being a songwriter and a producer and the engineer, because it's so difficult to see that. Whereas if I was an outside, if you were the producer of the record, you could have told me that. You could have been like, Chris, it's fine. It still sounds like you, just a different kind of you. It's difficult to kind of keep that perspective. It's very easy for me to have that perspective when I'm working with another band, but for my own stuff it's quite difficult.
Yeah, I guess it's about the different sides of your personality, and them can all just fitting into the record in different ways and coming up with different
The other thing is the argument for albums like that is, I'm a human being and I have different moods. You know, I'm not always going to be in that kind of jovial, knowing wink mood, for example. You know, I might be in a more serious mood. But again, I think just maybe out of curiosity, I'd quite like to do an album that's more a similar kind of vibe that you can put on, and not, you could be with a lover and put it on and not have to get up and change it halfway through because there's like an oompa band section. You know.
What would you say then is like the primary, do you think is the best environment to listen to the last record in then?
In a flotation tank. I just made it in the way that I listen to records, really. I don't always sit and only listen to music. Like, I don't listen to as much music as people would think I listen to, because when I do listen to music, I listen to it I try to listen to it quite actively. Like, yeah, I'll stick a record on if I'm like making dinner or cooking or something, or sometimes when I go for a drive, but I don't like constantly have it on in my headphones when I'm just doing stuff. Like, I've never really listened to music outside. I don't know if that's just because I never bothered to get headphone attachment to the new iPhone or whatever, or because I genuinely like just kind of sitting listening to stuff. I mean, I guess whatever works for you is the best way to listen to it, but I definitely wrote it with just people fairly actively listening to it in mind. I mean, there's definitely tracks on it that work on their own, certainly the more singly ones, obviously.
How did you put the singles for it? Because it seemed like they cover quite a broad spectrum when it comes to the different sides of it.
Well, some of the singles everyone kind of agreed on, and some of the other singles were more like a label thing. Every time the labels have tried to suggest that we do something and we do it, it never works. Every time we've done something off our own backs that we really believe in, it always works. Just with singles and stuff, like, they wanted some tracks that we didn't really want to have as a single, and obviously those were the singles that didn't do as well. If I was to redo the album list, the track list, I wouldn't have Your Old Dad on the album. I just feel that it's too much like the first album.
Would you have replaced it with another track, or just cut
We'd
it
have probably
completely?
put a different track on, I think. But that was kind of a record label thing. And at the end of the day, you're like, okay, fine, whatever. They are pumping money into it and things like that. But I don't know. If I was to do it differently, I'd maybe not have that track on it. I'm just probably overthinking it, really.
Do you have to pick your battles a wee bit when it comes to
Yeah, absolutely.
labels?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and probably the more money involved, the more careful you have to be with that sort of thing. So there's probably a lot of people that have it a lot worse than we do. And I think I'm just kind of at the point where it's like, well, we're not really doing it to be big or to be rock stars or anything. So I'd rather just do what feels right for us as far as possible. Obviously, because what's the point? There's a lot of things you can do with your life that are a lot easier and a lot more rewarding, certainly monetarily, than being in a band. If you're not doing it in a way that feels true to you, then you probably shouldn't do it as far as possible. But then also there's like, well, if you don't do this, then your album's not going to come out. You need to pick your battles, basically, yeah. But I reckon the more money involved, the worse that gets. So like if you're on a major label or whatever, I reckon it's probably, you have to be probably open to being completely rearranged in order to sell records, unless you got to the stage where you were like really, really, I mean, like even like Kanye West and all that, is he not having some kind of horrible battle with his...
He's going nuts.
Horrible battle with his record label at the moment. So, and he's arguably one of the biggest artists in the world. So,
have you been on the same label from the start?
No, we, from our first album, have been on a label called Modern Sky, and then our second album was on Modern Sky and also on a label in America called Palo Santo. Before the first album came out, we put stuff out on a label called Love Love Love, and before that we put out like 11 tracks or something in the course of a year and a half on loads of cassette tapes with a label called Fuzzkill Records in Glasgow, who were really, really good. And they don't really do so much to the label now, but the main guy in Fuzzkill kind of helps run that, Freakender festival.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so they're involved with that now. But they were the early champions of the band. They were the first people to put us out and things like that. So, but it was all on like super limited edition cassettes and stuff, and like we never put the songs on Spotify or anything like that.
What were those tracks like? Were they similar to the stuff that kind of followed after? What was the progression like?
Well, some of the tracks were like LUV. There was like an older version of LUV that we re-recorded for that Love 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 label. That was one of the tracks, and then there was like this instrumental thing that kind of became that Rita Ora track. Yeah, I know. Some people didn't get that was a joke.
I love that song.
Yeah, it's so stupid. It's so stupid. Yeah, there was just a lot of stuff. There was like a lot of the stuff that ended up kind of becoming the first album stuff, and then there was a few like we used to do loads of covers, things like that as well. So like we recorded like a Silver Jews cover, like an Emmett Rhodes cover and stuff like that. It was just kind of us figuring our stuff out. Yeah, but it was cool. It felt really pure and good. The more involved with the industry you get, I kind of miss that. I really miss the sort of, or we all kind of miss the sort of early days of the band where it was just like, we're just going to do whatever the fuck we want to do. We're going to put these cassettes out. We're going to book our own tours. We're going to do whatever we want, basically. Not that there's some big bad industry person controlling things. There really isn't. There's just a lot of pressures and stuff that come along with that just kind of make things really sort of anxiety inducing.
When you look at the two album covers from the first and second, there's obviously that clear kind of parallel. I love the second where you've kind of got the growth with the more instruments, but also the ferns that kind of insinuate that and further that. How have you grown most musically and changed most in terms of your approach between the two records?
Second album was probably much more of a studio thing. Like I'd kind of learned a lot more about production and gotten into the studio side of things a lot more. Like I think there was a real conscious thing of us to kind of get away from the first album sound. It was probably too like indie pop for us in some places. Like I don't really listen to indie pop. I don't really like it very much. We obviously all grew up listening to a lot of it. We're kind of an age where all that sort of mid-noughties NME stuff kind of seeped in. Like obviously I loved the Strokes. I really, really loved. I bought the first Strokes album when it came out. I was like 10. I'm kind of proud of that purchase.
How big were they at that point?
Yeah, pretty big. I mean, well, certainly in to me they were pretty big. I mean, in like the indie kind of world. Also, I mean, I wasn't really aware. I'd heard that track, The Modern Age, in a skateboard video, and I'd looked it up and I was like, oh, that's them. I'm going to try and find their album if I can. So all that stuff's leaked in, but the first the first album, I think a lot of it was kind of we just wanted to get away from the indie pop thing, because none of us are really all that into indie pop.
It is kind of you doing indie pop though. Like it's not just an indie pop album. It's you putting your kind of spin on that and working in elements of it to the kind of Catholic Action sound.
Yeah, totally. And I think, I mean, I think the songs that I write, or I can't really change the way I write songs to an extent. I mean, I do write kind of, do you know what I mean? I'm not writing some mad, crazy avant-garde record. I do write kind of fairly classically structured pop songs by default. They're gonna kind of end up that way. Yeah, the second album was just quite a conscious move away from that, and certainly much more of a studio thing, just because that's kind of what we were into, or what I was into at that moment.
Were you a bit more in control with the second one? Because obviously it's just yourself that produces it, as opposed to working on the first one with other people.
Yeah, I think so. Again, I think it was one of these things I sort of had to do, whether or not that's a good thing for my quote unquote career or not, I don't really know. But I just feel like I just kind of felt like I had to do that at that point in time. That was just the dynamic of the band at that moment.
I think you have to trust yourself though. Like what you were saying earlier about how all the decisions that you've made that you've been completely behind have paid off well. Once you can start doing that and you get a bit of experience, you can then can you rest a wee bit easier? Is there a bit of the self-doubt starts to kind of go away? Or
yeah, I'm just glad that we did it. I'm glad that it's out. I've not really thought about it all that much since it's been out. I've just been thinking about this stuff I've been working on recently, and just trying to be as honest as I can be with that.
Do you often take time to reflect? Or are you kind of very much someone who, once they've finished a project and it's out and the PR run's done, that you kind of just move on to the next thing quite quickly and keep going?
Yeah, because I'm kind of definitely, because usually by the time that it's out, I'm already sort of bored of it. Maybe that's why I can't, or I tend to jump between styles, but there's a lot of like different sonic influences, because I just don't have the attention span to to write something that's like one vibe. And maybe that's also why I kind of feel like I have to move on quite quickly. Like I just think it's important. Like it's just good. It's a really healthy thing for me to not, because I just naturally kind of overthink and dwell on everything. So if I can force myself to not do that by moving on really quickly, then that's good.
I guess music can be a slightly more positive way to channel that aspect of yourself as well. You know, that idea of overthinking things. Music's a healthy output for that, as opposed to, I guess, other things kind of in wider life.
Yeah, you just have to convince yourself to not overthink, basically, when you're in the studio. Because if you know about the kind of in some ways, I wish that we could just find a producer that we trust. I think if we ever were to make a third album, like I wouldn't want it to be, I don't want to record it, I wouldn't want to engineer it, I just want to like turn up and play kind of thing. Inevitably have a hand in the production of it, because I just probably couldn't help myself. But I think, yeah, whatever I work on in future, I think I'd quite like it to maybe not think about the technical aspect of it, or only think about the technical aspect of it when it matters. So like, which is why, again, to talk about that solo thing, is I'm trying to keep the processes really separate, you know, like the writing process and the demoing process, and then once I've got enough that I feel like can be put together as a cohesive album, then I'm going to tackle how I'm going to record it. I mean, and it may very well be me recording it, but at least at that point I've got kind of everything written and arranged, so I can just have this sort of technical hat on and not have to take the technical hat off and put the songwriter hat back on and make that change like 100 times a day kind of thing, because it's sort of exhausting, and it can definitely lead you to overthinking kind of thing. Swings and roundabouts.
Can switching between the two though, can it sometimes not help a wee bit with perspective? Like if you're working on something from a production point of view, then you go back to thinking about it more from a songwriting point of view, you maybe get something.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. It definitely can help. It's just one of those things that it can really help, but you can also end up in a point where you chase your tail. Especially if you have like the equipment at hand to do like a decent recording anywhere. You can kind of sit and obviously with things like Pro Tools as well, you can sit and endlessly tweak, which is why limitations are a good thing, and which is why if we were to do another record, would probably do it fairly live to tape. It's one of the other ways I'm thinking of doing the solo thing is potentially just putting a band together for the record, learn all the songs and go in and like blast it out really quickly, as opposed to kind of learn everything up one by one by myself on Pro Tools. So we'll see. But it's, I mean, they both have their ups and downs. Yeah, you just have to keep perspective basically, otherwise you can lose it really, really easily.
What have you learned from working on the two records and stuff that has allowed you to better keep perspective throughout the process?
I'm not really sure, man. You just kind of learn to do it. You just kind of learn to maybe know when to take a break or when to walk away from something and come back to it. Because that's the only thing you can do really. Sometimes you just have to go to bed and wake up the next day and hear it fresh, and then it's like immediate. You immediately know what it needs or what it doesn't need. And even sometimes if if it's in the middle of the day, if you go and have a cup of tea or go for a walk, come back and it just makes sense.
Walking can have a really interesting effect on music as well. Like if you go out and put on an album and it's almost like that weird sensation of movement and focusing on something else, like activates another part of your brain when you're listening to it.
I need to try that. Because I bought the little iPhone thing to plug my headphones in, but I've lost it. And there is a box somewhere in my flat with that in it. I need to find it and because again, like I was saying, I don't tend to do that. I think it would probably be pretty good. I should try it.
If you go out, I wouldn't say walking somewhere, but if you go out just with the intention of going for a walk and then listen to it, I quite often do it when I'm doing features and stuff. If I want to try and put myself in a different place to listen to a record and get a slightly different perspective on it when you've already heard it for the first time, it can be quite useful.
Oh yeah, I suppose, yeah, if you're reviewing it and stuff. How do you balance like cynicism when you're writing? Because sometimes I remember years ago I wrote album reviews for a blog for a while just for fun. I sort of got into trouble for being too harsh or like too negative about something. Do you know what I mean? But then at the same time it's like, well, why would you have a review website if you only ever wanted to post good reviews of things? I found it kind of confusing.
Yeah, it's difficult because blogs are in a weird position at the minute where you're very much at the will of the PR people in a weird kind of way. Like if you, it's kind of fucked because if you write a bad review, the PR person isn't going to like it and they're just not going to give you opportunities again in future. So it doesn't, the system doesn't work. But I mean,
yeah. Plus, then it's like it's not like the bands are going to share it on their page.
I know.
Come and read this review that pans a record that you should also buy.
I mean,
yeah. So
I mean, we've stopped doing reviews.
So
I stopped doing them. I took the section off a few weeks back.
Did you?
Yeah. I mean, I like writing them, but it's like I prefer just speaking to bands, to be honest. Like, and I was kind of just, to be honest, no one fucking reads them. So it's like, what's the point in spending 10 hours writing a review that 10% of the people who, I don't know, listen to a podcast are going to read, if you know what I mean. I just feel like when you're kind of, because it's just me that does everything, when you push for time, it feels that you should just focus on the things, I guess, that you enjoy doing a bit more. I did like writing them. Maybe I'll come back to it. I don't know.
Yeah. Fair enough.
It's tricky. What's like the most important question to ask yourself then when you first start working with a band?
Do I like them? Yeah, do I think they're good? I mean, yeah, probably that. I mean, do I think the songs are good? Because that's everything. Doesn't matter what I do. If the songs aren't good, then it's not gonna be good. But then it's a hard one if you're freelance because you're also like you need to pay the rent. So there's a balance. You kind of want to get yourself obviously to the point where you can pick and choose absolutely everything that you do. But good songs just jump out at you, man. Even if like. I'm always trying to get bands to send me demos. Demos. Yeah. I'm just like, just send me, just like go to the rehearsal room and stick your iPhone on voice memo and play that. Because you can hear a good song, even if it's recorded like trash. Do you know what I mean? You can still hear if it's good. So, yeah, that's the main thing. It's like, do I think the songs are good? Do I think that I can do maybe what they want me to do? Like, or what they want? Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't. And it's just, well, you kind of learn it as you go along. Like, you get, like, I remember really early, like years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was recording a band. And we'd recorded it live. Really trashy sounding, garagey drums and all that. Super trashy garage band, like, kind of, like, really fuzzy and all that. And then when we went to mix it, the guy was kind of like, oh, can we make the drums sound like a drum machine? Well, I'm really sorry, but I can't. I mean, why didn't you just use a drum machine? And again, that's just experience, man. It's just experience. You kind of learn to have those conversations, obviously, beforehand. But again, it's like not every producer is right for every band. You know, you'd maybe go to someone for a certain thing. It's just kind of figuring that out as well.
We don't need to get into specifics, but have you ever been in the middle of working with a band on a song and kind of realised that this maybe isn't the collaboration you should have gone for? And maybe like you're saying there, that not every producer is right for every band. You felt like this was a misstep.
Yeah, not that often. I try and avoid that more now. But obviously, when you're starting out, obviously that happens. You work with bands that you're just like not into that much because you're kind of learning as well. You know, and the better you get and the more sort of clout you get, the more you can pick and choose and really like seek out bands that you're properly into. But yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, it's just you know, ideally, the longer you do it and the better you get at it, you don't really want to end up in those situations.
Are there things you can learn though from working with a band in that situation? Are there lessons that you can take that you maybe wouldn't have got had they been a band that you've been thrilled to work with?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, no, yeah, totally. I mean, it's really just, it just depends. And there's always like, because you can work as a producer on stuff that you wouldn't normally listen to because you can appreciate it. Like you can appreciate where it comes from and you can kind of get into it. You know, even if you think it's if it's a well written song that's if it's a good song, even if it's not really in the style or the aesthetic that you would normally listen to, you can still like appreciate it for what it is. That happens a lot, but that's why it's like the main thing for me is the song. It's not really, the aesthetic or the style. I mean, obviously there's styles that I tend to gravitate towards more than others. That's like, I mean, it's just odd that I tend to, people probably don't really know it, but I tend to work on a lot of kind of folky singer-songwritery things. You wouldn't really think that if you listen to my stuff, but it's actually, I'm very, very much into that, and I've done quite a few albums of stuff like that over the years with other people that I really, really quite enjoy. I mean, again, you just wouldn't really think that if you listen to my stuff.
Yeah, I mean, again, it kind of comes down to limitations. If you put yourself like a genre like folk, where it's very stripped back, and it kind of forces you to focus on the parts of the song that are most important.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like, for instance, with the Cheap Teeth EP, then, what shape were those songs in when they brought them to you?
Man, Cheap Teeth were pretty fully formed, to be honest. Like, it's not like I had a lot to do, really. It was more just kind of getting the environment right and getting the sounds right and kind of helping with the arrangement here and there, but it wasn't. Cheap Teeth are really fully formed, and it's a real pleasure to work with bands like that. They just come in and you can bounce ideas, and it's not really, it really like every band is totally different. When you get a band like that, it's quite special. It just works. Just
that atmosphere of you both kind of radiating off of each other as well.
Yeah.
When you can feel it really kind of clicking into
place. Like obviously some things you have to, every job's different, and sometimes it's more like helping bands structure songs and really helping them get things together, but other times, yeah, it's just kind of setting the mics up and hitting record and getting the best take and things like that. But it really depends on the band and where they're at and what they're into and things like that.
Can you get like emotional? Can you feel the same like range of emotion with your own music that you can when working with another band? When you have that kind of, you're so tied to it.
Sometimes, yeah, I think so. It's harder as you go, like in the process of making the song. The further you go on with it, it becomes harder to feel the same emotions if you're like stuck in the detail until you like step back and look at all of it. But no, yeah, this time the other week, I got really upset when I was doing vocals and stuff. It was weird, but it was sort of a good thing in a way. I kind of ended up using those takes. I was like, well, they're definitely the most emotional of the takes that I've done. I should probably use those. But yeah, with other bands as well, man. There was one guy called Michael Cassidy. I'm working on his album just now. Done an EP with him before, and he's like a super folky guy. It's amazing. There's this whole other scene to Scotland. It's just a big folk thing that people don't really cross over into very much. Yeah, I remember like he was like, "Oh, I've got this new song," and they just went in and we were in the studio and everything was set up, and he did it, and I was like, again, like pretty much moved to tears. Just the first time I'd heard him play this song, I was like, "Oh my god, man, that's amazing! This has to go on the album. You have to keep this song," and they did. It was the same with Cheap Teeth. Like, and there's one song called "The Wind and the Rain," and as soon as they played, like, they weren't initially gonna record that song, and then they were like, "Oh, we've got this other song. We might do it, might not." I was like, just go and play it, and we'll see, because everything was set up, and it was like so good. As soon as they played it, you were just like, "Yep, you fucking have to. You have to record this song. You have to put this one out as a single. This is like, because bands don't always realize." I think you're right. I mean, I find it hard to. I don't always know that stuff about my own songs. Like, I don't always initially know, oh, this one's really good, or this one's a single, or whatever. You kind of, it's certainly, maybe when you step back a little bit down the line, it's kind of easier to see that stuff when everything's all finished up and you can, again, see the bigger picture. But hard to keep that perspective when you're in the band. But those are the kind of moments that really make you love doing it. When you just get a band like that and they don't realize how good they are in that sense.